First of all, thank you everybody for joining us. My name is Adina Lekovic. I'm the Communications Director with the Muslim Public Affairs Council. I've seen many of you before, and I thank you for being here under these unfortunate circumstances. As you all know, the reason that we're here today is to share our perspective as Muslim Americans on the crisis that is taking place in Gaza. To provide a personal story of those who are living this experience, to share our reaction to the events that are taking place and the airstrikes, and to announce a humanitarian campaign to help the victims and help those who are trying to live through this, these events that are taking place. We have, today represents the unity of Muslim leaders throughout Southern California, who come from organizations and mosques and who work with our local communities and who feel the pain that is taking place in the communities around these events. And we're also grateful to be joined by Rabbi Steve Jacobs, who is a longtime friend and ally and who has walked down this road with us for many years. So I will introduce each of the speakers, and I've asked them to keep it short. And I will spell out their names for you. You have all of them on the press release in front of you. They're all listed at the bottom, and so you can refer to them that way as well. So as we all know, to date there are more than 350 people who have died as a result of the Israeli airstrikes, and there are more than 1,500 people who have been injured in the last few days. Because of the blockade that is ongoing, that has been going on for months now, hospitals have short supply of medical supplies, people are short on food, cooking fuel, and electricity, you name it. And so the agonizing pain that is taking place on the ground today is the reason that we are assembled. The first person that I bring to you is Dr. Maher Hathout, Maher Hathout, who is the Senior Advisor to the Muslim Public Affairs Council.
Thank you, Edina. Good morning. I think that the amount of suffering that's taking place in Gaza and in this area is totally unacceptable under any pretext. We know, and our organizations always felt, that targeting civilians on either side is a wrong thing to do. But the response in such an outproportionate and cruel, almost barbarian way is totally unacceptable to decent human beings of any religion or of any political orientation. The Israeli war machine is executing an operation that is totally unacceptable by all standards. It is disturbing to us that our administration is really almost not only giving a green light, but refusing to do the reasonable thing, to join the world in calling for a ceasefire. That's a very disturbing reality, and it is adding to the problems in the Middle East and not conducive of American leadership for peace. The idea that it is an operation against Hamas and they want to change the government of Hamas, this is not the way to change governments. We changed the government in Iraq, and we are still in a total mess that belittled the atrocities of a dictator like Saddam Hussein. I'm so glad that we are launching a campaign for fundraising to help the Palestinian people. So we call on our government that at least they should guarantee a safe arrival of these aids to the people that are meant to receive it. And at the end, I'll be glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to bring to you Hidab Al-Tarifi, who is Palestinian herself and who has family who is living in Gaza and who she has spoken to and can share some of those personal stories with you. Hidab is spelled H-E-D-A-B, Al-Tarifi, E-L space T-A-R-I-F-I. And again, it's on your press release.
Good morning, everyone. I was born in Gaza, and I still have family living there. It's very painful for me to stand here and talk about my family's pain, but I have to be their voice that is sadly nobody else hears. For the first 2 days, I could not even reach anybody. It was very painful for me trying around the clock to call. And finally, when I was able to reach them, alhamdulillah, thank God, they're personally not hurt, but they tell me of the horrible situation that is currently taking place in Gaza. It is very cold. There's no electricity to heat, yet they have to keep the windows open. Otherwise, with all the bombing and all the F-16s flying very low, they're afraid that the windows will shatter. So they have to tolerate the cold weather. Kids are screaming nonstop. Parents don't know what to do. One of my cousins is a doctor who works at the Al-Shifa hospital. She tells me that they don't have supplies. They cannot handle the number of injured that are coming. The kind of injuries and the kind of burns that they're getting. She tells me that they're non-treatable. They have to amputate. They think that the bombs that are being thrown on Palestinians are illegal because of the kind of burns that they're seeing on the patients. There's no food. People cannot leave their homes to try to get sustenance for themselves and for their children. They've been living under siege for a long time, and now, even with the news that we hear that humanitarian supplies are getting into Gaza, they're not really getting to the people because everybody's afraid to get out of their house and distribute them. So we definitely need a ceasefire for this humanitarian effort to reach the people that it's intended to. One thing on a personal level that I wanted to mention. I was watching the news last night and I heard President-elect Obama, during his last visit to Israel, was talking about how, seeing a father who was his kids sleeping next to him and being thrown rockets at, as a father, he would do anything to stop that. And he was speaking for the Israelis. I have to speak for the Palestinians because that is exactly what happened yesterday. A father with his 9 children sleeping next to him, only to wake up and 4 of them are totally dead next to him. As human beings, we have to realize that here in the US, we care about not having animals being tortured or starved, yet we stand as so-called human beings allowing 1.5 million to be starved, to be humiliated, to be fearful for their lives and the lives of their children. I do believe that humanity is dead and buried now in Gaza, unless we do something about it.
Thank you, Hidab. Next is Hussam Ayloush, Hussam as in Mary, Ayloush, and he is the Executive Director of the Council on American Islamic Relations of the Greater LA area.
Good morning, everyone. We demand that our government take immediate steps to end the immoral and illegal Israeli bombardment of the Gaza Strip, which has already resulted in the death of close to 400 people, including 8 children just today, and over 1,700 people wounded, including many women and children. We also demand that the Bush administration join with the international community in seeking an end to the savage collective punishment imposed on the civilian population of Gaza by Israel's ongoing blockade, which has been going on for 3 years. According to Oxfam, only 137 trucks of food were allowed to Gaza last month to feed 1.5 million people. Gaza needs 700 trucks every day. The United Nations says poverty has reached an unprecedented level. Hospitals are turning away the sick because they cannot handle those sick anymore. This is barbaric, and it's more barbaric that is being committed with the blessings of the Bush administration. We further demand and call for a resumption of the ceasefire. Failure To take strong steps to end the Israeli attacks and restore the ceasefire will only damage our efforts to bring peace with justice to the Middle East. It will harm our nation's image and interest worldwide and strengthen the voices of extremism in the region. To end this cycle of violence, the incoming Obama administration should adopt a more even-handed Middle East policy that is in the interest of our nation and not solely in the interest of Israel. To deal with the core issue of peace with justice, the Palestinian people must be given some hope of freedom from the Israeli occupation. And we as Americans and as a government should support a just and comprehensive solution and resolution to the conflict that takes into account the rights and responsibilities of all the parties. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Frank, you can step in anytime.
Okay.
Thank you, Hossam. And next we have Ahmed Azam, AHMED, AZZAM, who is, I'm sorry, AHMAD, last name AZAM, who is with the Muslim American Society Los Angeles chapter. You said?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Mass Freedom joins with the international community and all people who love peace and justice in demanding a halt of the full-scale Israeli bombardment and possibly ground invasion to Gaza. And we call for the community in large that to stand for the justice and peace. We call upon the United States of America and especially the incoming administration of President-elect Barack Obama to provide any and all assistance for the construction of the lasting peace agreement between Israel and Palestinian people in Gaza and the whole land. We demand that a new administration honor both international law and the U.S. Arms Export Control Act by not using these illegal weapons against the civilians. We in mass against hurting any civilian from any party. We respect the human dignity and the human life for anyone. So as much as we are against hurting any civilian from both parties, we are against killing 300 or more than 300 people in Gaza. People in Gaza today, as I'm watching the news with my children, I have 6 children, and all of us, we're watching and feeling the pain of those children losing their lives, and for those parents, women, elder, and these killing doesn't understand who's in the way of these rockets. We are against killing all of these people. We ask for the international community to act with the United Nations to stop the war in Gaza and to place the peace as soon as possible. People need water, electricity, and medicine, and that should take place as soon as possible. And we call upon everybody to act as soon as possible, as I mentioned earlier. Thank you, and may Allah accept and make the peace among the whole human mankind. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. Next we have Dr. Muzammil Siddiqui, M-U-Z-A-M-M-I-L, Siddiqui, S-I-D-D-I-Q-I. And he is the chairman of the Islamic Shura Council of Southern California, which is the umbrella group for over 70 mosques in Southern California.
Peace be to all of you. The people of Gaza have been suffering for the last 3 years a terrible economic blockade. They have been living in virtual prison condition imposed on them by the State of Israel. They have been denied the basic necessities of life. Now these oppressed and armless people are being targeted by the most sophisticated bombs falling upon their heads from all sides. In the past few days, more than 350 people, mostly civilians, have been killed and more than 1,600 injured. On behalf of the Shura Council of Southern California, an organization representing most of the mosques and Islamic organizations in Southern California, I condemn these Israeli attacks on the innocent civilians. We urge our government to take urgent action to demand an immediate ceasefire. We urge all Muslims to dedicate next Friday for special prayers for the people of Gaza. We also urge all people to contribute generously for the humanitarian aid, food, medicine, and shelter for the suffering human beings. In this cold weather in Gaza, there are thousands of people who are homeless, foodless, medicineless. We have learned that many hospitals there have depleted their medical supplies. They do not have even anesthesia and are operating on the injured without anesthesia. I pray to God to help them and to help all humanity to learn how to behave as human beings to each other. We pray for peace and justice for all people. Amen.
Thank you, Dr. Siddiqui. And now we want to introduce the humanitarian, one of the humanitarian campaigns that is being conducted not only in Southern California but around the country to try to provide, raise money to provide that food, that medicine, all of those supplies that are needed, particularly by those victims. And so I want to introduce Mustafa Mahboob, M as in Mary, O-S-T-A-F-A, M-A-H-B-O-O-B, who is with Islamic Relief USA.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. I just want to start off by a brief introduction of the Islamic Relief. We're an international humanitarian aid organization. We're apolitical, and our main priorities are to provide the humanitarian needs on the ground, whether it be in Gaza or around the world. And as you have heard already, the situation there is very dire. The United Nations and other aid agencies had claimed before the current crisis that the humanitarian situation in Gaza was the worst in 30 years. And that was extremely horrible for a population of 1.5 million. And now with this ongoing escalation that has tremendously risen, and the need is tremendous on the ground, and we're urging the public and all the organizations and communities across America to please open up your hearts and your pocketbooks to support the humanitarian needs on the ground in Gaza. As the people there are waiting for your help, the aid that's getting in is very minimal. The situation of delivering the aid is very difficult. Our own organization, our own staff on the ground, we have offices in Gaza. We've been working there for 10 years, but our staff are risking their lives to deliver the aid. And when they're out there and trying to deliver medicines and other aid to hospitals, they have to call each other every few minutes to make sure they're alive and report back to the office that they're still out on the ground and indicating where their location is. Islamic Relief so far, just in the first 48 hours, delivered over $126,000 worth of medicines to hospitals in Gaza because the need was tremendous. The hospitals are facing a severe shortage of medicines, basic supplies. They're converted their reception areas to hospital beds on the floor for the patients because there's no room. And they have to turn away the injured because there's not enough supplies or rooms in the hospital. So I just want to close off with reminding everybody that the need is tremendous on the ground. As a humanitarian aid organization, we implore the human community, the citizens here in Southern California and across the U.S. to support the aid works that's going on, that's been conducted with organizations such as the UN and other agencies that are calling for immediate access to humanitarian channels, immediate support from the international community to provide more aid than has been available for the people of Gaza. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mustafa. And finally, before we open it up to questions, I want to provide Rabbi Jacobs with an opportunity to say a few words, because what you see today is not just a force of Muslims or of Palestinians or of Arabs. It is a force of peace, and a force that is calling for peace on the ground, and we have our partners in peace. People like Rabbi Steve Jacobs and organizations like J Street and others who are calling for an immediate ceasefire on the ground. And so I want to just provide you with that opportunity.
Thank you. Just briefly, there's great pain in both of our communities, especially in the Middle East, in Jerusalem, in Gaza, and we need to share that pain. This message, in particular of humanitarian aid, is deeply significant, in which all citizens should respond. While we may differ politically, we have a long relationship, and it's come to be where we can discuss honestly, not only in our differences, but in the realm of godliness of how we treat one another. That pain is palpable here in our community, in which so much has been accomplished. and we hope that it will not divide and conquer those naysayers. Israel needs to live in security. The rockets must stop. Israel must stop, and there must be great leadership, particularly that comes from the incoming administration in the waning days of the Bush administration. Many critical opinions could be shared, but the important thing is to be able to support one another in this great humanitarian request that's put before the American people. And thank you for being here.
Rabbi, could you spell your name for us and what organization?
Stephen Jacobs, Steven Jacobs. I not only represent Sheriff Barker for the outreach to the Muslim community, but a long standing relationship with Muslims and Jews, particularly since 9/11. We have been intimately involved in each other's lives. And it's also part of the foundation work, the Progressive Faith Foundation.
Great. At this point, let's open it up for questions. And if you would like to direct it to anybody in particular, please let us know. Go ahead.
Isn't this an exercise in futility to even have a media conference when the U.S. media is only giving the Bush and Israel side of it? They act like Qassam rockets are the same as these missiles that are dropping down on their people. And it's the Gaza ghetto. It was 50 years ago, it was the Warsaw ghetto. Now we have the Gaza ghetto, and they're shooting it like fish in a barrel.
I mean, there is no debate that Israel's propaganda machine has succeeded in informing the American public, and with it our U.S. media, in telling a false story, in telling a story of basically blaming the victim, the Palestinian victims who had been victimized by Israel for the last few decades. There's no debate today that the Palestinian people are counting on the voices of peace and justice in America, whether these are Jewish voices or Muslim voices, but these are voices. We cannot despair just because people are misinformed. We cannot despair. It's a time to speak up and tell their story. They might not have access to the CNN and the Fox News to tell their story, the story of their pain, the story of Israel's continuing embargo, siege, not allowing people to leave Gaza, enter Gaza. Israel might have left Gaza 3 years ago, but it has turned Gaza into one of the largest prisons and jails in the history of mankind. Gaza today and the people of Gaza live in the largest ghetto. They're not allowed to enter, leave. Food is not allowed. Supplies is controlled by Israel. Airplanes cannot land. Boats cannot come in. Unfortunately, turning the Gazans into prisoners in their own land. And ironically, most of the people of Gaza, over 70% of people of Gaza, are themselves refugees of Israel's creation. They were forced out of their homeland just a few miles north to Gaza, from Ascalon and other areas. But we cannot despair. We count on the goodness of the American people. When American people, our fellow Americans, hear the stories from the Gazans, have no doubt that they will respond in putting pressure on our government, present administration, but also in putting all they can in helping alleviate the humanitarian crisis that's going on as a cause of Israel's barbaric attacks.
Do you feel like Muslims have an ear in the Bush administration or not?
Unfortunately, the voices of peace in America don't have an ear with the Bush administration as we speak nowadays.
I was talking about Muslims specifically.
Specifically, Muslims don't have an ear with the Bush administration, but we're not just counting on the Bush administration itself. We're hoping that the American public will respond to the cries, to the images of pain, blood, murder that we're seeing. No one can deny, with the access of internet, no one can deny seeing the great injustice that is happening today in Gaza. Those who don't respond should ask themselves, what made me remain neutral in face of this tragedy? The question becomes, we all said never again after a first Holocaust that targeted innocent people. This is the time when we come together, and this is an example where Muslims, Jews, Christians, and all peace-loving people come together for the sake of humanity. Every human life is a life that deserves to be protected, whether it's Jewish, Muslim, or Christian. And this is a time when we're watching the death of many innocent people without help, without support. And this is a small token that we can do to end that tragedy.
You compare this to the Holocaust, the Jewish Holocaust?
Any tragedy, there's no comparison. Every tragedy is a tragedy on its own. There's no need to compare any tragedy with the other. We can mourn and be sad about the genocide that happened in Chechnya or in Bosnia or during World War II and the Holocaust. But that does not mean we cannot mourn and try to do something against the genocide, literally a genocide that is happening against the Palestinians.
Can I ask one other question? What do you think is the appropriate response for Israel to the rockets coming from Gaza?
Without getting too much into the politics, because the goal of today is really to focus on the humanitarian aspect of it. But the situation is very simple. This is not the first time a country faces threats to its security. And historically speaking, countries respond with proportion to the attacks. A good example is in the last few days since the end of the ceasefire, about 80 or depending on which number you go with, let's say about 150 or 200 rockets have been shot. You know, these are primitive, homemade type of rockets thrown at Israel. Not a single casualty. And if Israel wanted to respond, there was a ceasefire that was called on. A ceasefire that called on both sides to stop targeting civilians, to stop shooting at each other, and to open the checkpoints and open the borders. Israel has refused to open the borders. What is needed is we put pressure from our government to pressure both sides to abide by the ceasefire and to open the borders and allow people on all sides to live in peace. And if there are political issues that need to be dealt with, such as Israel's occupation of the West Bank, Israel's treatment of the refugees, UN resolutions, the establishment of the Palestinian state, these could be done in a peaceful way without resorting to the use of the Apache helicopters, F-16s, or even rockets.
I just want to add that the goal that we're looking at is that our government has a responsibility. We here in the United States, as Americans, cannot call on the Israeli government to do anything, cannot call on the Palestinian governments to do anything. Our goal here is to talk about what our government can do here in the United States. The U.S., the Bush administration, is the only one that has the leverage, the pull, the U.S. taxpayer dollars that are going into the region. And so it is our responsibility as Americans to call on our government to intervene, to preserve human life, because all human life is sacred. And this cycle of violence must stop. It is in America's interest to prevent further bloodshed in the area by the Israeli government using these airstrikes and what threatens to be an escalating ground campaign that will take more life. Instead of curbing extremism, it is going to breed more extremism. It is going to create more extremism on the ground. The thing that we all want, the goal that we all share, is that we want to prevent further violence on the ground, no matter what side it goes towards. And the actions that are taking place today only guarantee further bloodshed on all sides. Instead of eliminating the threat of Hamas and the rockets into Israel, it is, as we are seeing today, there are more rockets that are going into Israel rather than few. This campaign is counterproductive, and it is only creating more extremism and militancy on the ground and more recruits for Hamas. I think that we can all agree that that is the last thing that we want to see. We want to see peace builders on the ground. We want to see people who are building for a different reality that comes in the future. And for the Bush administration to turn a blind eye is unconscionable. We expect our government to have more moral courage during this time. And that's what we're here for, is we expect as America that we will demonstrate the moral courage, that will demonstrate to the world community that what we stand for are American values. Any further questions?
I just wonder how you're going to get the medical relief to Gaza, while I mean just yesterday, the Free Gaza movement with their boat that's the fifth journey to Gaza was intercepted by the Israeli government, even though they knew that. Who's on the boat? 5 doctors and former Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney,
right?
Everybody. They have 3.5 tons of supplies, even though they know the whole purpose before they were in the international waters, they intercepted, they rammed the boat, and they stopped them, and they turned them back
Right.
to Cyprus.
I get the question. I'll turn it over to Mustafa to talk about their, what is happening on the ground in Hidab. Perhaps you can.
I'd like to make
Go
a
ahead.
comment. Just because currently the Israeli government is not allowing humanitarian effort to enter the Gaza, Gaza, that does not mean that we do not, as human beings, start working on getting that humanitarian ready, because I think the whole world needs to make that effort. I know the United Nations is pushing to get humanitarian, and I know Egypt is opening the borders. So we should not be, just because one incident that took place with the Freedom Boat, that does not mean that we should be stopping from doing the right thing. And I'm sure with everybody's voice, with us citizens of this country pressuring the administration and pressuring the United Nations, we should ask for a ceasefire to allow this humanitarian to enter Gaza.
It is very difficult to perform humanitarian work on the ground in Gaza with a group like ourselves, with Islamic Relief. Wherever limited resources we've had established on the ground, we try to use that to meet the emergency needs. Like I said, within the 48 hours of the start of the escalations, we distributed over $126,000 worth of medicines that we had in our storage facilities. But again, the needs are much greater than the resources available. That's why all the governments across the world, as well as all the humanitarian organizations, are really pushing for better humanitarian access, safer humanitarian routes for workers like ourselves and organizations like Islamic Relief to do their job, because our main duty is to help the innocent people on the ground, to give them medical relief when they're injured, to give them food because they're hungry, and the access and the supplies that are available right now are not conducive to performing the needs that are existing. So the job is very difficult. We're doing our best as a humanitarian organization, so are other agencies such as the UN, but that's why we're here today to ask the public support, ask everybody who's listening that we need more humanitarian aid, we need your donations, we need your support, as well as we need better climates for us to do our job on the ground to help those in need.
Go ahead. Do you want to make?
I assume that we are wrapping up now, but I want to make some points clear. The idea that is being marketed now is that it is all the fault of the Palestinians that are allowing Hamas to do that. And this is such a false logic, because we tried before to change a government that we don't like by force, and we removed Saddam Hussein from Iraq on the expense that no sane person will accept, and strangely enough we are repeating the same story. Number two, I hope that that bug of bias does not infect the new coming administration, to start from the premises that we are totally committed to Israel no matter what. Want to be committed to Israel if this is in the best interest of the United States, and if it is according to international law and the rules of humanity. But if Mr. Obama starts by the Pledge of Allegiance, that unconditioned support, I think our country will be in the same debacle that we are at now.
All right, I want to end it there and just mention that, again, the humanitarian campaigns that are being conducted on the ground, money is being raised here to provide direct aid to victims of violence in Gaza, are being conducted by Islamic Relief USA, by KinderUSA, by the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund, and by ANERA. And so we will be directing our communities to provide aid to these organizations so that they can do this important work on the ground.